Welcome to In Confidence, hosted by me, Rosie Downing. In this podcast series, I speak to people who've been on surprising, often bumpy rides in their quest for personal and professional confidence, and to the experts who can help you get there.
I've yet to meet somebody who doesn't secretly believe that they're not good enough.
My identity was so much more than my job, and perhaps it was time to not let that define me anymore.
One of the ways that we become truly confident is when we like ourselves. The more we like ourselves, the more confident we become.
So many people are so overtaken by their own fears, they don't want anybody else to try things. Take any small step that you can take.
The most potent thing is ultimately doing what you said you were going to do when no one's watching. When no one's watching and you choose to do something hard that no one's patting you on the back for, it will return.
Imagine you wrote a novel that sold millions of copies worldwide. A novel that helped define a whole new genre of literature and ushered you into exclusive and glamorous social circles. You'd be feeling pretty confident, right?
I felt this tremendous pressure to fit in and to show everybody that I was good enough. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, I actually have no idea.
My guest today is the Agony Aunt's journalist and international best-selling novelist, Jane Green. Jane's second novel, Jemima J, published in 2000, became one of the defining novels of the then brand new genre, chick lit.
I had this enormous hit with this book, Jemima J, that was like a modern Cinderella story. And it really struck, and especially in the States where it became this huge success. And I stopped being Janie, and I suddenly became who I thought I had to be in the face of that success, which was a best-selling author. And it was this persona of Jane Green.
I want to take you back before that though, Jane, because you had the success really young.
Oh, God. I mean, I think it was the first time that I ever felt good enough, actually. I grew up thinking that I wasn't enough in any area, whatever it was. I wasn't clever enough. I wasn't thin enough. I wasn't pretty enough. I thought I was nothing. And yet I also weirdly had this confidence in work. And I think partly because I wasn't allowed a voice as a child. The mantra was, I had two mantras in my family about me. And one was, Jane is difficult. And the other one was, Jane is ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. Jane is ridiculous. And this is what I carried with me. And yet somehow in the work arena, I always felt pretty okay about myself. I was quite fearless. And I think part of that came from this absolute drive to be heard and to be seen, because I wasn't heard or seen. I wasn't allowed to be heard. Even my early adult life was about wanting to be heard. But all of a sudden I wrote Jemima J, and suddenly I was celebrated by the world as being enough. It changed everything about my life. And it gave me an extraordinary, well, it looked to the outside world like an extraordinary confidence, but actually I hadn't done any of the work inside. So the truth is, it was all superficial. I just suddenly was making boatloads of money and had this very glamorous life. And so I felt like, well, other people now look at me and see that I'm good and I'm proving to them that I am good enough. But actually, I hadn't done any of the internal work to support it. So it was enormously superficial. And yet I stepped into that persona and lived in it for years, decades.
You had New York Times bestseller after New York Times bestseller, 18 New York Times bestsellers, 21 novels, 10 million books sold worldwide. Do you think you knew deep down that it was a persona?
Oh, I don't think I knew at the time. I think I thought it was real, and I had no idea how fragile that confidence was. But also, the thing is, it was so superficial. I remember I was so invested in what the world thought of me. It mattered to me so much what was written about me, what was said about me, what people thought, even people that I didn't care about at all. I had this huge desire to be accepted and loved and seen as good enough. And so I had a lot of the trappings that you were supposed to have at the time. I had all those shockingly expensive handbags and ridiculous jewelry and things that were, I now look back and see that that was armor. That was my way of saying, I knew deep down I still felt like the little girl who wasn't good enough. But I thought if I could armor up enough, I would be showing the outside world that I was, because I could afford all these things. And it took me years to actually understand that that wasn't real. It was enormously fragile.
When did you discover it wasn't real?
Actually, I think the real change happened on my 50th birthday. And I was having this amazing party. I was already obsessed with Morocco, and I hadn't even been to Morocco, but I was having like a Moroccan 1960s themed birthday party. And everybody was coming, and we had a marquee and music. But I remember waking up and looking at myself in the mirror, so aware that I couldn't deny that I was stepping into what Jung calls the afternoon of life now. I mean, this is it. It's highly unlikely I've got 50 years. I'm beyond the center point. And I remember thinking, I've got no idea who I am. I'd spent so many years shoehorning myself into a persona or into who I thought I needed to be in order to fit in my, I lived in this sort of very wealthy suburban town on the water in Connecticut, an hour outside of New York, filled with, hedge funders and stay-at-home mums, wives that don't work. And everything was about status and money. I felt this tremendous pressure to fit in and to show everybody that I was good enough. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, I actually have no idea. And this phrase came into my mind, which has stuck there and is still there, which was, who would you be if you stopped caring what anybody else thought about you? And it was this incredibly powerful phrase that I don't know where it came from, but it lodged itself into my head. And it kind of started this journey of figuring out who is the real Jane, not the persona, not the best-selling author, because it was so easy for me to feel confidence from that. But if you strip all of that away, who is the essence of Jane and what matters to you? And actually, the truth is, I think perhaps it's impossible to strip it all away, but it was stripped away from me without, there I was on my 50th birthday at the sort of thinking, my life is wonderful. And then shortly afterwards, the pandemic happened. And then we lost, basically we had to sell our house because we couldn't afford it. And my career was on the fritz. And I just felt, and I had a falling out with my best friend, and like all these terrible things happened. And my marriage was also, under, it was clearly going through a really difficult time. And I felt like everything was stripped away from me, and I didn't know who I was. I had absolutely no idea. And I ended up in a really dark place for about a year. And I was diagnosed with depression many, many years ago, and it's fine. I don't talk about it. I don't really think about it very much, because it's sort of, I think of it as a kind of low-grade depression where sometimes I have to go to bed for a bit and I'm fine, and I sort of surrender and I work from bed and I wait for it to pass, and it always does, and I'm fine. And obviously in America, they give you pills for everything. So I was on antidepressants anyway. But I hit a place that was really much darker than that. And it wasn't that I was ever suicidal, but I didn't see the point of life. And I couldn't imagine there ever being any joy in life again. So I broke. I really properly broke. And then came the process of building myself back. And this time it wasn't building myself back under the false construct of the persona of who I thought I was or who I presented to the world. It was really finding out who I am and what makes me happy, and what kind of people am I drawn to, and what do I want out of life, and what kind of choices do I want. And I realized that the life that I had been living what didn't suit me. It wasn't what I wanted. Actually, when I stripped away the constructs of who I thought I had to be, not just as an author, but as a wife and a mother living in this town and throwing the beautiful parties. That's not who I am at all. And actually, it's not who I ever was. Interestingly, I remember, as I started to sort of find myself, my mother once said to me, I'm so glad that you're sort of coming back to yourself. She said, because all of that stuff, the big houses and the design stuff, she said, Jane, you were an art student. You were never it was never your thing. And it actually never was. It just was who I was trying to shoehorn my square pegged self into a round hole in which I really didn't fit.
It sounds as though success was a bit of a straitjacket.
Success was, in some ways, it was glorious because, especially if you remove money worries, if you remove financial fears from life, I mean, life just becomes so much easier. And you are celebrated, even though it's kind of a false celebration because you're not actually being celebrated. Anyone who has any kind of success or is perceived to have success, wealth, or fame, celebrity, there's like a sparkle that they have and it pulls people to them. And so everybody suddenly wants to be your friend. And I had grown up as a child who wasn't one of the populace. I wasn't one of those girls. I always wanted to be friends with those girls. And all of a sudden I kind of was that girl. And so it felt glorious because you don't know when it's happening that you can't trust it. During the pandemic, I was the sole breadwinner and the financial pressure was just enormous. And we had to sell our family house, which I loved to the depth of my being. And that was the first kind of devastation. But it was amazing how people changed. We moved into this tiny little beach cottage that I'd bought years ago as a rental investment, was never supposed to live in it. And I spun a lot of stories because, of course, the great fear was people will know that we don't have the money they think we have. People will discover that we're not as successful as they think we are. And so my life was spent with this, under this sort of cloak of shame, furiously spinning plates and stories about, well, we're downsizing because we're going to travel, or we're looking to buy another house. We're going to just bullshit stories. So just to ensure that nobody actually knew that we had to sell a house that I loved because we couldn't afford it, because I wasn't earning anything like the kind of money that I used to earn, and I was the only one bringing in money. And the shame of being exposed was enormous. We moved into that little cottage, and the extraordinary thing was how many people in our life disappeared. How many people that I thought were our closest friends, gone.
And all of that time wasted telling those stories when you could have been actually the stories that really connect us to other people are the truth. And
that was the beginning of me. I was fed up with the lies, and I was fed up with spinning plates and stories. And I knew then that I'm such an honest person. I mean, I always kind of joke that I was born with the honesty gene, but I really was, and I really can't stand dishonesty. And it was taking such an almost psychic toll on me to tell these lies and to pretend to be someone or something other than we were. And I just made a real commitment to just being truthful, actually, which is where I've remained. And everything in my life has changed. In that pursuit of truth and authenticity, I had to leave my marriage, which was incredibly difficult. I loved my husband deeply, but there were fundamental flaws that were not being addressed, and I couldn't do it anymore. I felt this calling to Marrakesh, which was a city I'd been coming to that made me feel very alive. It was kind of the one place where I felt all of my senses were stimulated, and having felt like I'd been living underwater for some years, Marrakesh just woke me up and brought me back to life. And my friendships changed enormously. Not my old friends. Interestingly, all of my friends from London, where I grew up, all of my friends from teenage years and my 20s are still my best friends today. but so many of the people that I had accumulated and collected over the years in the States, especially when I was, being this big author, dropped away. I mean, there are a small handful that remain. And it's really interesting. And now I've come to Marrakesh and I've had to build a whole new life here. But this time as a completely authentic person who's not trying to be anybody that she's not, who I could care less about keeping up with the Joneses. I mean, I've been to a couple of parties recently that have been big sort of fashion parties or big, CNBC, and lots of celebrities flying in from London and New York. And they felt ghastly to me. I've stood there and looked around at people who are trying so hard to be someone. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? That I think we all carry that shame. I've yet to meet somebody who doesn't secretly believe that they're not good enough. Most of the women that I know carry this sort of internalized shame that actually we kind of know that we're not quite good enough. And our great fear is that somebody else might see that. And that's why we armor up with the designer bags and the jewelry or the careers or whatever else it is, or the perfectionism of it and the entertaining. We twist ourselves into pretzels trying to show the world that we're good enough because we secretly believe that we're not, and we're terrified of that. And that's what I've got no interest anymore in going to parties filled with people who are trying to be seen as something. And it's been really fascinating, actually, looking at the people that I've gathered as my closest friends since I've been here. And I would say they are some of the most immediate and authentic connections that I've made. Because, of course, once you're being truly yourself, you start to attract, well, you still attract the insecure people, because people often, when they see you as being very confident and very secure, they often want a piece of that, but actually end up kind of resenting you for it or being a bit intimidated by it. But so I still sometimes have that, but I would say 90% of the people that I now attract are not only secure in themselves, but are also living truly authentic lives and don't feel the need to prove anything to anyone.
Have you learned how to tell yourself you're enough?
I think the short answer to that is yes, with the caveat that I still have slips all the time, and I still have moments where something kind of fells me, but not for long. And I've really learnt my value over these past few years. And it's not that I expect anybody else to see my value, but if you don't, then you're not for me. I understand what I deserve now. And I never understood that before. I was always so grateful. If a man who ticked all the right boxes fancied me, well, yes, of course I'd go out with you. I didn't know that I was allowed to have a choice. Sometimes I'd marry them. I didn't know that I was allowed to say, oh, actually, no, I don't like the way you're treating me or the way you're speaking to me. And no, I'm not going to marry you or stay with you. I didn't realize that I was allowed to say that. And that all comes from not having a voice as a child. And I think that's been a seismic shift for me, is recognizing my own value and also accepting that not everybody's going to see that. And that's totally fine. And if they don't, then they are just not for me. And I think actually part of that has been coming to terms with the fact, because I was such a people pleaser. My whole life was spent trying to make other people happy. And if I had to change my entire personality in order to do that, I would do that. That was no biggie. Sure, of course. I'll be whoever you need me to be. I was such a chameleon. And part of this journey has also been becoming very comfortable with being disliked. One of my other gigs, and I have a few, is the agony aunt. I'm the agony aunt. I'm Dear Jane.
Dear Jane.
For the Daily Mail. And when I first started that, I was still in my people-pleasing mode. And every week when I'd write my columns, I'd go and read the comments, and they were so vicious. They were so cruel. And they weren't just about what I'd written. They were about my looks. So it was sort of striking at the core of my insecurity. And I had the most unbelievably vicious comments about what I look like. It was absolutely brutal, and it would sort of take me a couple of days to recover every time I read them. And after a while, I thought, why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you punishing you? And actually, do you even care? I mean, why are you caring what people who you don't know, you'll probably never meet, think about you? I just write what I really feel, and I advise people in exactly the way I think they need to be advised. And I don't care what people think. It's given this tremendous freedom to my writing. And it's true of life. When you stop caring what people think, it allows you to be yourself. And, one of the things that I found was that, as my mother realized, I'm a former art student. My nature is actually much more free-spirited and bohemian than the life I was living in kind of suburban America. And now I've found my true self is always, I'm slightly obsessed with the 60s, it turns out. I stride through the Medina in Marrakesh in my snakeskin flares with feathers and furs and huge earrings. And some people think I look slightly ridiculous, and some people come up to me and compliment me on what I'm wearing, and neither one is important, because it doesn't really matter. I'm doing it for me.
This is something that people people are often asking me about. They're often not feeling like they have the permission to do that. So how do you think you start to give yourself permission to ask for what you need if it's something that isn't in your language?
I really believe that tone is everything when you're asking for what you need. If you ask for something from a place of kindness and respect and love, you will always be heard. When we're on the defensive, or we're angry, or we're stressed, it will often come out in a way that we don't intend, and it won't be received. But when you are calm and you come from a calm place, there is nothing that you will not be able to ask for, and it will almost always be heard.
I love that. And I love the idea of schooling yourself. So if it's new to you, asking for what you want, taking yourself to a completely different environment, like your dating environment, where you don't have a pattern, and so that you can break that pattern that you've been in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can still do it you can still do it in every area of your life. There are probably a myriad of times, if you're a people pleaser, there are going to be a myriad of times in any given week where tiny little things will happen when you say yes when you mean no, or you say yes because you think that's not a big deal. Yeah, fine, I'll just do it. It's catching it. It's becoming mindful. And every time something happens that you realize you're about to say yes when you mean no, you say no.
Because this is so practical. So I think the thing that I'm really taking away from this conversation is what you said to yourself on your 50th birthday. And I want to put this, can you remind everyone of this question? And I feel like we all need it on our walls.
Yeah.
So what's the question?
The question is, who would you be if you stopped caring what anybody else thought of you?
Jane Green, thank you so much. You are wonderful. You are also a little bit ridiculous, but amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie.
What an open and generous conversation with Jane Green. What really struck me was this question: who would you be if you stopped caring what everyone else thinks of you? This podcast is designed to be practical. It's not just a great conversation. I want to actively help you boost your confidence. For that reason, each episode is accompanied by a short Substack post with a tool or an exercise to help you apply the ideas we've explored in your own life. You can find those by subscribing to In Confidence on Substack. and these posts are free for season 1 only. And if you have a question for me or a comment on one of the episodes, or you just want to say hi, you can email dearinconfidence@gmail.com, or you can WhatsApp 07377 231 025. That's all from me. See you next time.